Welcome to the Tempo Storm Master Series brought to you by eSmarter. The Master Series aims to help you master a particular deck by bringing you an in-depth look at it, and also will provide you with enough information for you to gain a competitive edge when playing against the featured deck. We will be featuring a top ladder deck in order to give you the best edge possible when climbing the ranked ladder on your way to becoming legendary. Today on the Master Series, we'll be taking a look at Bomb Warrior. Bomb Warrior has been the highest rated deck on the meta snapshot for a while, and for good reason. This archetype is extremely versatile and can win almost any matchup. With the right tech cards, you can prepare for anything that you may encounter, giving you a huge competitive edge. It's important to have a solid understanding of how to play and beat the best deck in the game. Before we take a deeper look into the current Bomb Warrior list, make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the rest of our Hearthstone content. Now let's take a look at one of the best Bomb Warrior lists. Bomb Warrior is a very versatile archetype that has several different builds. While all of the builds are fairly similar, they each offer different matchup spreads. Today, we'll be taking a look at a list that has had a lot of recent success. This list comes from Galen, who used it to achieve an impressive second place at the Hearthstone Las Vegas Masters Tour. Before we take a deeper look, it's important to remember that his list was intended for the specialist format, meaning he had the option to sideboard cards into his deck. Here are all three of his lists, but for today's video, we'll be focusing only on his primary list. At first glance, this list looks fairly standard as it features all of the deck's core cards, but what's really interesting to look at are the cards that he chose to include only a single copy of. For example, Galen opted to run one copy of Spellbreaker in order to better his matchups against the various mech decks that he feared queuing into. On top of this, the card also serves as an answer to Edwin Van Cleef early in the game. While this tech doesn't change the matchups entirely, it definitely does its part to help the warrior in finding a win. This list also chooses to run Archivist Elysiana. Following its nerf, this card fell out of a large percentage of Bomb Warrior decks, but due to expecting a lot of Bomb Warrior mirrors in the tournament, Galen chose to include this to better his matchup. For this reason, he also chose to only run a single copy of Brawl, as the card is often dead in the mirror. Galen's list is really well-rounded and can pull off some amazing wins. Let's take a look at the deck's general game plans in different matchups. There are a lot of different decks in Hearthstone, and with that, different archetypes. For simplicity's sake, let's break down the archetypes into three categories: aggro decks, control decks, and combo decks. For the purpose of this video, we'll be grouping mid-range decks with aggressive ones, as they often play out the same in the current meta. While you can certainly go into more depth with each archetype, this is a good place to start with. Let's begin by looking at Bomb Warrior's game plan versus aggressive decks. Aggressive matchups can be slightly tricky to navigate, but your game plan tends to be simple: don't die. Depending on what type of aggro deck your opponent is playing, your game plan will differ slightly, but whether he's a board-centric deck or a burn-based one, Bomb Warrior has the tools needed to survive. Against decks that flood the board, look for removal cards in order to stabilize the game in your favor. After clearing their board multiple times, they'll begin to run out of resources, and from here you can stick your own threats to start pressuring your opponent out of the game. Against burn decks, you'll still have a few threats to deal with, but make sure to focus on maximizing your health total in order to avoid dying to burst damage. Control matchups can be a bit more tricky. You need to find a time to use your removal so that it doesn't end up stranded in your hand, all the while steering clear of your opponent's win condition. In these matchups, the game will often come down to Archivist Elysiana, so avoid drawing cards early unless needed to ensure you don't fall behind in fatigue. Once you play Archivist, make sure to look for threats opposed to removal so you can try to pressure your opponent out. These matchups are a test of fatigue both in and out of the game, so make sure you're mentally prepared for a grind. Combo matchups vary depending on what combo your opponent is aiming to pull off. If your opponent's combo is looking to kill you, you need to find a way to either kill them first or outlive their damage. This tends to be the majority of combos that you see nowadays, so it's important to know what you need to play around. The two best combo decks currently are Holy Wrath Paladin and Freeze Mage. Against Paladin, you want to look to kill them with your bombs. Due to how aggressively they need to draw for their combo, you can just shuffle bombs in their deck to ensure they die while drawing cards. If they reach fatigue, you can ensure that they will draw the bombs by shuffling as many as you can that turn, providing you with a huge amount of burst. Freeze Mage, on the other hand, can win the game through either minion pressure or burn with Archmage Antonidas. If they reduce the cost of Antonidas with Luna's Pocket Galaxy, you typically won't be able to outlive the burn, as they will generate nearly endless fireballs, so in this case you have to look to pressure them. You should aim to deal with each of their threats while trying to tempo out your own in order to slowly chip away at their health until you can kill them. As we mentioned previously, Bomb Warrior is an archetype that has room for quite a bit of tech cards. Due to the nature of control decks, different cards can be slotted in to better fit the meta that players are encountering. We're going to break down some of the more popular tech cards and show you why they're powerful. Thanks to the specialist format, you see a wider range of tech cards being used than normally. Players can sideboard cards into their list based on what matchups they expect to see, and thanks to some newer tech cards, they have begun to see more frequent play. One really popular inclusion is to add a second copy of Spellbreaker and 2 EMP operatives in order to target the mech-based decks that were built to beat Warrior. Due to how bad these matchups can be, hard targeting them tends to pay off fairly well. In order to make room for these cards, consider removing your greedier cards as they won't be very good in these matchups. Cards like Archivist Elysiana and Harrison Jones don't make the cut against these aggressive decks. Another frequent group of tech cards that you see is the Anti-Mage package. Due to how common Conjurer-based mage decks are, players have begun adding in more removal cards specifically targeted towards beating these mages. Big Game Hunter acts almost purely as Mountain Giant removal, making it difficult for the mage to tempo out of one of them. This makes it harder for them to go off with Conjurer's Calling, giving you more time to assemble your removal. If they do manage to use Conjurer's Calling on a minion, you now have Super Collider to easily answer the threat. Finally, if they decide to go super wide, you have Brawl to swiftly clean up the board. Due to how Galen built his list, it already fends off the other matchups well enough that you don't need to build the deck for them. The deck is well suited to deal with all of the aggressive decks, as the deck is inherently a control deck, and it's good in the mirror due to Galen's choice to include cards such as Elysiana. Now that you have a firm understanding of how to play Bomb Warrior, we thought it'd be interesting to take a look at how to beat Bomb Warrior. At some of the higher ranks, this deck comprises roughly 10% of the meta, making it a huge threat for anyone grinding ladder. One of the easiest way to gain an edge against Bomb Warrior is to play one of its worst matchups. While the deck is well-rounded and can tech for most matchups, it definitely has ones that feel horrible to play. Mech Paladin is a good example of this. In order for the Warrior to gain an edge, they need to go all out on teching for the Paladin. Even then, you can still win games on the back of Kangur's Endless Army being simply too much for them to deal with. If you wish to play a more complex deck, you can go the route Dog went by playing Freeze Mage. This deck does very well against slower decks, and if you draw Luna's Pocket Galaxy, the game is often over before it even started. Much like the Paladin matchup, the Warrior can tech for this Mage deck, but it won't make the matchup favored by any means. If you want to gain an edge against Bomb Warrior without changing what deck you're playing, consider adding in weapon removal such as Harrison Jones to help limit the amount of bombs they can shuffle into your deck with the added benefit of cycling. If you're playing a slower deck, you can even add Archivist Elysiana in order to remove the bombs from your deck. Make sure you're playing a control deck if you wish to add this in though, as it's far too slow for aggressive decks. These are a few ways that you can gain an advantage against Bomb Warrior. Make sure to try them all out and see what works best for you. In conclusion, Bomb Warrior is an extremely powerful archetype that has been at the top of the tier list for quite a while now. We hope that this video has helped you gain a deeper understanding of how to not only play this deck, but also how to beat it. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, let us know by liking it and leaving a comment below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with our future Hearthstone content. We'll see you next time!